die Teil von Mitglied von Urgency ist in Griechenland, und sie ist auch Teil von der Helleni-Bewegung in Griechenland, also nach dem Punkten in Krems, also wovon Ludwig schon erzählt hat, haben sie halt ein großes Netzwerk auch in Griechenland gegründet. Und ich glaube letztes Jahr und ich glaube dieses Jahr auch, haben sie eine Permakultur-Caravan von Süden bis nach Norden von Griechenland hat es organisiert und haben dort verschiedene Workshops und Veranstaltungen gestaltet, wo sie versucht haben, Nachhaltigkeit den griechischen und Griechinnen beizubringen oder beziehungsweise untereinander sich auszutauschen. Jenny ist auch Teil von Neighborhoods in Action. Das ist eine Aktivistinnengruppe in Thessaloniki. Genau. Und das ist eine informelle Gruppe, die aber auch zu dem lokalen Parlament in Griechenland oder beziehungsweise in Thessaloniki Vertretung gefunden hat, und sie setzen sich im Parlament dann für solidarische Ökonomie, für Ernährungssouveränität, für Menschenrechte und für politische Veränderungen an. Jo.
Hello everyone. So I'm here to talk to you about what happens when a country is in an economic crisis. And first of all, I think we need to understand that being in an economic crisis is a very particular thing. It is unlike a natural disaster or a war where roads get destroyed, water gets polluted. This is a virtual crisis because the land is still there. The water, the machinery, everything is still in existence. And so are the people willing to work the land. What is missing, what is difficult or even prohibited, is the access to resources. It is also the ownership of the commons that is at risk, as it quickly passes from public to corporate hands via fast-track privatization processes. In the case of Greece, we're talking about an economy that is in the clutches of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, but we're also a member of the European Union and the Eurozone, which, by the way, are two completely different things, unlike what they would have us believe during the referendum week of terrorizing propaganda we endured from Greek and international media, but also from local and foreign politicians banging hands on tables, addressing the Greek people, demanding we deliver a yes vote or else. So in any case, we are a member state of the EU, and that makes the crisis even more interesting, because things were already not going the right way anyway. And that is because each member state has to adhere to things like quotas on production imposed by the CAP, the Common Agricultural Policy, and the various free trade agreements like the TTIP that the European Union signs on our account and with our explicit absence. So, and here I would just like to say that in the month of July, the month of July expressly demonstrated the democratic deficit we are experiencing not only in the EU, not only in Greece, but in the whole of the European Union. But maybe that's another story, and then again maybe not. Because we, the people, have absolutely no say in what happens to our lives and our livelihoods. As we saw with the no turning to yes referendum in Greece lately, but also from the fact that it's not even the elected Euro MPs that make these decisions, but bureaucrats of the ECB, the Commission, and the IMF that dictate which hospital gets to close down, if cancer patients get their medicine, and if we are allowed to feed ourselves with our own produce. For example, take the Greek sector of milk farming, which in the course of the last decade saw the extinction of 63% of its farmers due to the production quotas and the fines imposed on us, while at the same time we were being forced to import milk, fresh milk, from Germany and the Netherlands. And here I want to say that as part of the reforms we had to make in Greece for these memoranda, 10 days old milk now is regarded as fresh, so that we can keep it open. Okay? So, to my mind, the CAP is equal to a highly addictive drug that renders farmers completely dependent on subsidies and member states unable to plan their agriculture strategy with food security in mind, rendering the very idea of self-sufficiency a far-fetched utopia. This is why food sovereignty for us becomes linked to civil disobedience, and this is why the only way out is self-organization. Self-organization. In these last 5 years, the IMF and memoranda years, Greece has lost 25% of its GDP. Unemployment levels are sky high. Youth unemployment is recorded, it's much more, but the recorded is 60%. Suicide rates were about 300 per year. For the last 5 years, the reported deaths as suicides are 5,000. And we know that the actual number is at least 3 times higher. Water is being privatized. Mountains are violently exploited for less than 1 gram of gold per 1 ton of soil that will be blown into the air. The only hospital for children cancer patients is closing down because it's understaffed and we're not allowed to pay for doctors. And let's not talk about the recent refugee crisis with hundreds of thousands of people coming into our shores on a daily basis. And these people end up being taken care of by the civilians. So you have the poorest country of the European Union at present left to deal with the biggest influx of refugees in Europe since the Second World War. So this hectic situation leads thousands of people to flee the stagnant hopelessness of city life and, like modern-day gold diggers, head for the far west that is rural Greece. To get an idea of the scale of things, there's 10 million people in Greece and 5 million live in Athens, or the greater area of Athens, so you can understand how abandoned the countryside is. As testimony to that outflux, the Greek population working with the land is 13%, whereas the European average is 5%. And the fascinating thing about that is that all the people coming from the cities bring with them their new ways, stimuli, know-how and ideas. Against all odds, confronted with absurd bureaucracy, legislative gaps and taxation inequalities, these people, bearing new ideas, are creating innovative agricultural products with the explicit view to export. For example, Vasilisa honey that contains 24-carat gold flakes, and is now the latest hype in the White House. Yes. But at the same time, cooperatives of all sorts are sprouting with new ideals, new ideals, new type of ownership and decision-making models, and new ideas about the whole concept of the product. A group of milk farmers in central Greece, in response to the milk cartel's bullying, formed a new cooperative called Thes Gala, Do You Want Milk? And they provide fresh milk daily through their own direct point of sales in various cities using automatic milk bottling machines. And now a new such cooperative is being created in the northeast of the country called Amnos, the land. And the same goes for the area of medicinal herbs that Greece is so abundant with. It is very invigorating to see that in times of such hardship, people decide to follow their dreams and passions and take a leap of faith. And of those that dare try, many succeed. On the one hand, that is a tremendously good development, because the Greek agricultural product was suffering from very poor branding both in and outside the country, and it is still very common to see top-class products being sold loose, unpackaged, unbottled, without even the proper labeling. So this way, they are strengthening the preying intermediaries and exporters. At the same time, this is an instinctive reaction for the survival of the self in dire times. But it shows that despite the adversities, there is potential. The question now is how we use this potential. The latest pack of harsh measures, signed just after our explicit no to more austerities, in order to save the Greek, the German and the French private banks, is now bringing new havoc for all, but this time it is especially vicious to the farmers. Greece is a country with very particular geography. It is full of mountain ranges and islands. So that makes transportation especially costly, and this, together with the fact that most farmers have very small plots, is why they have been enjoying special status when it comes to tax, with tax exemptions, and lower prices in order to help keep the agricultural product affordable. From 2016, farmers will have to prepay 55% of next year's tax. Farmers' taxation rates and insurance contributions will rise. Taxation on farming petrol will rise from 66 to 330 euro per ton. And of course, there is the monstrous rise of VAT for almost all products to 23%, and I'm not even going to talk about the taxation on housing, on medicine, transportation, everything else. So in this context, the word survival takes up a whole new meaning. And we are clear by now that the state is not on our side. It's forever against us, not side by side with us, and it has nothing to do whether it is a right or a left government, as we now know. To survive, we need cooperation and commitment, something that doesn't come easy, and we need to turn our ingenuity and creativity from trying to make a profit into providing for those around us. We need to make sure that the communities will survive. We need to switch from the individualistic I to the collective we. And we have all that is needed, and it is happening. People are offering idle pieces of land for collectives to be created. Abandoned villages are being revived. Many attempts are made to create eco-communities and eco-villages, and groups like Homo Trapezy, sitting on the same table, and agronomes are connecting city folk to groups of farmers, cutting away the middlemen, organizing collective orders. Cooperative and social food stores are being created, not-for-profit supermarkets like Bioskop in Thessaloniki. People occupy urban spaces and convert them to gardens like Perka, ex-army barracks in Thessaloniki, or the parking lot turned into an urban garden in Exarchia, Athens. Farmers are organizing box schemes, and people are talking about solidarity farming and CSA in order to create stronger bonds with the food producers. We are proud to support the biggest web of hiring seed savers in Europe, with Beliti being the largest network, and we are also glad to have Mr. Panagiotis Manitis, the successor of Masanobu Fukuoka, the father of natural farming, in our midst. Last year, we organized the permaculture caravan to boost alternative farming methods. But we also have to remember that 75% of Greeks live in cities, so we need to find solutions for them, and CSA is the very thing. In the last month, even though we are in the pre-election period for our 5th government in 5 years, we announced there will be the first national gathering on CSA, and the interest has been overwhelming. Both producers and eaters are recognizing the benefits of localizing production and consumption, helping farmers to stay in their locality, thus helping their own communities in turn, and doing so in solidarity by sharing the risk and the reward of the field. But solidarity is being built slowly, and it is based almost entirely on volunteer work and exchange. Many of these projects are not at all extrovert. They're not looking to become known or to grow big, and some are even opposed to external funding, thinking that it was this very dependency that brought all this on. And in most cases, they are also fed up with without a shade. Political parties who for their own agendas are creating NGOs that are supposed to give solidarity to all, but in reality employ their own crew of people, have very successful presence abroad, but no real foothold in the communities. In our name and on our behalf, but many times without our awareness or consent, collecting money from institutions and movements. This becomes apparent every time I talk to someone from the bottom in Greece, and it gets verified every time I talk to a foreigner who thinks that working with the left, ex-government, means that they are helping people, which of course they aren't. Syriza reinforced the old habits and the practice of assignment and used this to gain votes. If you want to help a particular initiative, then go to them directly. No need for intermediaries and go-betweens. And in closing, I would just like to say that people, it is people, the normal, the simple people, that are showing the way. They're exploring the third option, not private, not state-owned resources, but socially owned with public character. The whole country is a huge lab, where we're experimenting within a hostile environment, the government, the legislation, the capital controls still in place 2.5 months now. We cannot use our credit cards to buy anything outside of the country. Importers and exporters are dying because they cannot send money outside of the country. So everything is against us, yet we persist. And I think Europe and the world has a lot to learn from the petri dish called Greece. So watch this space.
Kommen wir zu unserer letzten Gästin, unsere Spanisch sprechende